Welcome to the TriStar Podcast, where martial arts meets family, faith, and personal growth. Join Professor Brummett and Professor Chris Bean as they share stories from the mat, lessons from life, and tools to help you and your family live like black belts on and off the mat. It's time to train the body, sharpen the mind, and strengthen the spirit right here on the TriStar Podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Listen, today we're going to talk about leadership, and everyone wants their child to be a leader. But let's be honest, when people say leader, what they really mean is more confident, popular, outgoing, in charge, successful. And listen, I don't know if you know this or not, but that's not what leadership is. That's often really what that is. It's visibility. Real leadership is quieter and much more rare.
Couldn't agree more. And I'm excited about this topic, just primarily because, I love leadership, but the fact that, even have our own leadership program. And so we take leadership very seriously. So I'm excited about this one. But I know the first section that we really want to kind of talk about is leadership is influence. And the fact that, your actions influence others. So whether you're being positive or negative, you're being an influence on somebody. Whether it's on accident or you're intentional about things, you are having an impact. You are being a leader to someone. And look, leadership isn't just standing in front of the room like what we do in when we're teaching a class. Yeah, we might be leading the class, but that still doesn't mean that others in the class aren't leading. Because I don't know about you. I know for me, when I was going through the ranks, especially, all the way up to black belt and then into even some of my black belt tests, I wanted to be the one that, especially on the tests, I wanted to be the one that everybody was looking at for the energy of the room and the motivation and all of those things, even if I wasn't the highest ranking in the room.
Yes. But yeah. And okay. So speaking of leadership as influence, I think and that was a key topic that we're going to talk about here. I think that if you had to boil it down to what is the most basic definition of what leadership is influence. That's what it is, word for word, that's it. And the interesting thing is we can have influence whether we are the owner, the manager, or even just an employee as an adult. And then as kids, you have all kinds of opportunities. Kids have all kinds of opportunities to have influence over people at school, at home, in their friend groups, on whatever teams they might be with their brothers or sisters. So with that in mind, influence is the amount of influence, the impact that you can have on other people. And like you said, yeah, absolutely. I've been on tests. In fact, I think I told the individuals I was testing with last time, and that maybe this was a bit harsh, but it wasn't like I said this behind their back. I told them, so listen, my job on this test is to make it look like I'm graduating college and you're barely graduating high school. Now, the inside of that was I was going for 6th degree black belt and they were going to 4th degree black belt. So while we were on the same test and we're testing next to each other, I was going for, 11 years. I was 11 year further down my path than they were. So that was the thing that I knew already going into it, but I wanted to very clearly make that visible to anybody that was watching and the testing board, because that's where I wanted to be at. And again, I wasn't hiding it. I told the people I was testing with that. Hopefully I told them that so that they would know to step their game up and hopefully meet me or try to catch up to where I am.
Yeah, and to put that into context, it's individuals that you've trained with and that you are training, and
not only
you
that,
have
but
a relationship with.
Yeah, I worked with them. The individuals that I tested with. Not only did I train with them for a huge number of years, I worked with them for a huge number of years. So we had a good relationship already. So it wasn't. Yeah, I think it was taken the right way, the way that I was hoping that it was taken. But again, it's not like I was bashful about it. Listen, this is my goal at this test. Is I want to make it look like I'm graduating college and you guys are just barely graduating high school. And again, year-wise, that's pretty close to how, years in time in training as the output was. But all that to say is influence. We have influence over all kinds of different people, from adulthood all the way down to kids, right? We all have that influence. Now, the question again is, are we influencing people in healthy ways? That's the key thing to try to answer.
Yeah, and I know when we talked about this on other podcasts, you've not had a conventional job
Mm.
because as from age 14 or 15, you've worked at the studio and you've been there ever since. But and the reason I bring that up is because we hopefully, I feel like we've created an environment that does foster that. But people that go to work, they have a different environment than what we have at the studio, and I can attribute to some of that just because I've had conventional jobs prior to the studio, but I've always tried to be the one that had a positive attitude, that would bring levity to situations, that would, maybe give a different perspective as things went on. And the funny thing was, is I never looked at it as leadership. I mean, knowing now what it was, looking back at that, I was tacitly leading some of those people with my thoughts, with my ideas, with my demeanor. And looking back, it's man, that's quite interesting to have those experiences and then now know what those were, not knowing that I was cultivating leadership at that time.
And I think it's interesting to know now, like being in the leadership game, I don't know how else to say it, but knowing a little bit of the insides of how leadership works and being able to dissect it in such a way that we can teach it means that we have a different relationship with what leadership is. Now, like you're talking about, we know that leadership can happen even though we're not in a leadership position, right? That
Yes.
leadership, we don't need that position, like that title doesn't necessarily mean, and most of the time you go into a quote unquote normal job, and I say that because I've never, like you said, I've never had a real normal job. But you go into a quote unquote normal job and the manager, the owner, whatever the higher, person, quote unquote, that's in charge doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually in charge, because I know you can be in a meeting and that person who's in charge asks the question and everybody looks at somebody to see how are they going to respond to this. And then however that person responds, okay, that's what we're all collectively going to do, because this person, while he's not or she's not the actual, person in charge, they are the person who has the most influence over the entire team. And so the team moves in that direction.
Yeah, and we just got to be, to your point, we've got to be people of influence that are doing it in healthy ways. But in a nutshell, leadership is influence. And so as a parent, we're always influencing our kids with, how we respond to things, how we react to things, the way that we've set up our lives. All of that is an influence. Therefore, it is leadership. As let's say a school teacher, the school teacher goes in, they are the leader of that class. They're influencing even the paraprofessionals that come alongside the teachers and help out. They're demonstrating influence, therefore they're demonstrating leadership, and so on and so forth. And it's really neat for me to kind of look back and see those qualities and those influences that are happening in the studio, not knowing that I was and we were, because it's not just me, because over time we've evolved our leadership program, but that we were doing that almost from the beginning, just because martial arts kind of has that hierarchy and those type of things. But we purposefully went through and started to put those things in there on purpose. And what I mean by that is the influence opportunities. So when you had, let's just say, a white belt, but you have a yellow belt there too, and you knew the yellow belt knew the material that the white belt was doing and was able to, you gave that yellow belt the opportunity to work with the white belt. Hey, I'm going to pair you guys up. They're having a little bit of trouble with this. I want you to work on this with them. Just that small little opportunity. And I still utilize that, where we will see individuals out on the floor, and most of our instructors have come from this, where I have seen them and go, yeah, I could see them being on leadership. I could see them being on storm team. I actually could probably see them being an instructor one day. And then affording them those opportunities like that, saying, hey, so-and-so, I'm going to pair you up with this person because they need X, Y, and Z, and just to watch and see how that plays out. And now we have a structured program, but even when we didn't, I was kind of doing that, not knowing that I was creating a structured program, if that makes sense.
It does, and what you're alluding to is that really responsibility is there before leadership, and so responsibility has to come before leadership. And when we are evaluating the students to see if they're ready for that leadership program, like you talked about, what are we evaluating? We're seeing if they're responsible, right? Are
Yes.
they able to, one, are they able to do the moves and the information and handle that level of information already? And if so, then we can talk to them about leadership. And the way I like to do the leadership interview, which is something that happens as they get on, or actually before they get on, we have to sit down and do an interview. And okay, so there's a couple of interesting, cool things that happen for that. In that interview, especially if it's a kid, that is the first time ever that they're going to be interviewed for anything. And while I have been on the business in, how would you say that? I have led more interviews, both for leadership members, for storm team members, and even for jobs
Yeah, members, yeah.
than I have ever been on the receiving end of. So that's an interesting thing, but nonetheless, those kids that go through that, they get an opportunity to do a quote unquote job interview. And we
Yes.
send them a video. It talks about how they need to dress, how they need to respond, how they, all of that stuff, because that is so important for them to be able to do. And part of that conversation, and one of the things that I talk about there is I tell them, listen, this is basically you and I sitting down and you telling me you are ready for us as the school to hold you to a higher level of responsibility. And that's what this is. This is you asking us to hold you to that higher level. And with that higher level of responsibility, there's going to be some things that you're going to have to do. These are the things. And we walk through the whole thing. But that responsibility is first. And kids want authority before they want the responsibility. Adults do too, if they're
I
being
was going to say,
honest.
yeah, not just kids.
Right. Listen, if they're being honest, listen, everybody wants to be able to have this thing, the microphone, even just for a little bit to say their thing before they move on. Few people actually want the accountability that goes with leadership, but leadership starts with responsibility, doing the chores, showing up on time, being prepared, keeping your promises. And a big one that most people mess up is owning their mistakes. And if
Yeah.
somebody can't lead themselves, how are they supposed to be able to lead somebody else or have influence over somebody else?
Well, and the inverse is mostly true, not all the time, but mostly true. So, in corporations, generally the one that is holding the microphone, whether it's deserved or not, meaning that they're the loudest and they're the most voice, they're the what do I want to say, type A, whatever type thing. Those are the individuals that usually get noticed and promoted
Hmm.
before other individuals. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they were the best pick, but they were the loudest pick. And so then you got the phrase, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, but that doesn't mean that they were the correct pick. It was just they were the loudest. And so I love the fact that you are drawing this out, that responsibility really does precede having authority, or at least it should.
Hmm.
And in order to have I think a good leader, it is someone that takes the responsibility, even over the authority. And it's kind of funny because we used to, when people would, forget pieces or articles of what they were supposed to bring to class. So their responsibility, like now we have a responsibility chart, but prior to that, I would give out essays.
Mm-hmm.
So if you forgot your belt, you'd have to write an essay, or you forgot your sparring, you have to write an essay, or whatever it was. And now I like our system better now, but I remember one specifically one time this child had forgotten an article. I forget what it was now. It could have been the belt, but the mom kept saying to me, she was saying, it's not his fault. And I said, you're right, it's not his fault, but it's his responsibility. She said, yeah, but it's not fair that he has to write a paper because it wasn't his fault. And then I said to her, I said, well, I understand that it's not his fault, but ultimately it's still his responsibility because, he's doing class. And one more time, like a third time, she's like, yeah, but and I said, so Mrs. So-and-so, what I hear you saying is that you're going to write the paper? And she says, no, he can write the paper. And, so she didn't want the responsibility. And I unfortunately had to, and I had a good enough relationship with her that I could do that. But I had to draw the distinction. And one of the big distinctions for me was, and I forget the author, but it's in the West Point Way of Leadership book, where he talks about that there was things that happened in the military that wasn't his fault, but it was still his responsibility, and he still got scolded for it, even though it wasn't his fault, but yet ultimately it was his responsibility. And so responsibility is a huge part of leadership, especially if you want to be a good leader. You do have to take that responsibility, and have that well before you get the authority.
And I think another tenet of leadership is service.
Mm.
And this is there's a whole architect of leadership that is like a whole path you can walk down that is servant-based leadership or service-based leadership. And I think that especially with leadership and service, this is where culture gets leadership wrong. Because leadership is not, hey, look at me. Hi, I'm the loudest one. I got the microphone. What leadership really is how can I help you?
Yes.
And
yeah.
Listen, and we've talked about this already, but Jesus modeled this perfectly. He modeled this perfectly in John 13, washing the disciples' feet. The highest leader in the room became the servant,
right?
Yes,
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And that flips this modern day leadership upside down. Real leaders help others improve. They notice people who are left out. They serve without applause, and they help to make the group stronger. That's their goal, is to serve the other people. And if you think about it, and you talked about this all the time, and I don't know that we've talked about this on the show, but leadership from the way that you talk about this is you want somebody to respect you as a leader, not because of the position or belt that you hold or the authority that you have, but because of the type of person you are.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is a very clear way to explain this servant-based leadership. And if you think about it, without the people that are there helping you, without your team, without the people who you are leading, if you alienate those people, who are you a leader anymore? Who are you leading? There's nobody left. So you have to be there for your team. You have to be there to have a group mission and help everybody out along the way in order to serve whatever that group mission is. Now, maybe that group mission is said to us by the owner of the organization or by the higher ups or however, but our goal has to be both that, but also in serving our team, or maybe in serving the customers or clients that you're working with. That, because again, without those people, without the clients, without the team, who are you leading? There's nobody left. There's nobody there.
Yeah, you're left alone to lead yourself, which you should have led yourself first.
Yes.
But
yes.
Yeah, the longer that we have the studio, the more I realize that, well, I mean, I knew that it's not all about me, but I realized, because we wouldn't be here if God didn't want TriStar Martial Arts Academy to exist anyways. But the more and more I realize the fact that it's taken a collective of people over time to get us to where we are at today.
Yes.
It's not just been me. And quite frankly, like it's been neat, because even I can recall some of like our staff meetings, and we would have these staff meetings, and then I would ask questions, and then you guys would give answers. And often, not sometimes, often was the time that the group would come up with, or one person, but it was still based upon the group, would come up with answers to those questions that were better answers than what I was even thinking. And so it has taken a collective to get where we are today, is what I'm saying. But I realize that even more so now than ever before, that's been the case. and hopefully I think I've done a decent job. I've not done a perfect job of having our staff primarily, and then the students secondarily, and then the parents too, respect me for my personality over my position. That's why I've always said, just call me Mr. Brummett. Like, I never wanted to do the master title when I had the master title, the associate professor title, the professor title. I mean, in some of the stuff we do it, but if you notice, I honor you guys with your titles though, because you guys deserve that. And I think that that's right. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I think doing that, it when you honor us like that and have the correct title for us, what that does is that takes the light that might be shining on you off of you, and you are shining that light on the team. And what happens in that point is I think back to the 1 minute manager, where it's like private praise and public, no, private reprimand and public praise. I got it backwards.
Yeah.
Where you're praising your team for doing the right thing, but you don't do that behind a closed door. You do that in such a way that the entire team, or even sometimes the clients or the customers, can see why we are where we are. It's not because of like the owner, the manager, whoever, and you do this as well. It's not necessary, and it's not necessarily because of you, but it's the team that you have around you, and that team wouldn't be there if you weren't there. You were orchestrating us to be able to grow us in such a way that we could step into the roles that we're in, and you have us all, I think, in the right roles, and give us the right responsibilities that allow us to have enough room that we are able to make errors, because it's important to make errors so that you can learn things, but not so distant that we have no direction or idea of where we're going. Does that make sense?
Yeah, hopefully that's true. I mean, I'm glad that you said that, because that's what I've hoped to do, is to be able to craft that in a way that you guys have this much space to work in, and allow you to work inside of that space. And then when it comes out of that space, to go, okay, hey, what were you thinking when this occurred?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't want to just say like, hey, stop it. What are you doing? It's like, I need to know where you're coming from, because, and most of the times that that's happened, I can actually see from your vantage point going, I can see why you made that decision.
Mm-hmm.
And I've said this many times, I think even on the podcast, but even to you guys, the fact that, you guys, you're operating on this much information now, but when you first started as a storm team member, you were operating on, minute information, and probably more about the business than you even want to know now. But so, I mean, it's necessary, but you know what I mean, compared to, I mean, look, being 14, 15 years old, and we are all had some naivete to us at that time, was, I think, much more pleasant than being an adult sometimes, and knowing everything, right?
Yeah. Especially looking back. Yes, absolutely. And
Yeah.
the other thing is we are able to grow and learn that we're not capable of making carbon copies of ourselves. Everybody does something differently, and different doesn't necessarily mean wrong. It means different. And sometimes things work for other people that don't necessarily work for us. And I know that was a growing opportunity for us that me and you got to go through together. And now I think the team that we have can benefit from that growth that we went through.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
Totally. Totally. So, servant leadership, I think the next part of leadership is, having emotional control.
Yes.
Being able to control your emotions is a huge aspect of leadership. So, staying calm under pressure. So, how many times have you seen me blow up in the years that? So, how long have you been in martial arts with me?
I started in 99.
Okay, yeah, I can't do the math now,
Well,
but
it's right now it's 2026. So
27 years.
uh-huh.
All right, so 27 years. I'm venturing to say only once you've seen me blown up, at
One
least the
time.
one time that I know of.
That one time, yes. Mm-hmm. And there was a number. That day was not it was a big day. There just was a lot of moving parts to that day. That even me as a relatively young storm team, maybe a staff member at that point, I could see some of the bigger pieces at play, and there was a lot. it was a lot. And just that one thing knocked the house of cards down.
Yeah, I regret that,
Sure.
but yeah. So, and I'm not saying that I'm, yay for me, I'm perfect. But what I'm trying to get across is that as a leader, we have to have a an ability, to the best of our ability, to control those frustrations, to take correction,
Mm.
control your anger, and that emotional. I know some people call it now emotional intelligence. I don't know that I like that term, because when you attach the word intelligence to it, it means that if you don't know how to handle your emotions, that you're stupid. That's the way that I take that.
Okay, I'll push back on that a little bit. I like emotional intelligence because it's intelligence. I think that then it's like a skill and it can be learned. And because it can be learned, that's where the intelligence comes in. Because you're not born with intelligent, like you're not born an intelligent baby. You learn things, and so that emotional intelligence for me, that EQ is normally what it's referred to as. That means it's a learned skill, and while somebody might be terrible at it now, it is something they could learn to be better at. That's my interpretation of that intelligence part. I do see what you're saying on one side, but the side that I come from is where it's a learned, it can be learned, the skill.
No, I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. But just the fact that we have to have that emotional intelligence, that emotional control under pressure, especially if you're going to lead people. So as a parent, we got to keep our emotions in check. We have to be, and we've talked about this before, but we've got to be the thermostat.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be the thermostat in the room, not the thermometer that is reacting. So now the temperature's risen, and now you put the thermometer in. Oh my gosh, it's 110 in here, right? But no, 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 no. I've got to be that thermostat so that I can control it. And I would say the neat thing over time for me is there are less and less things that I blow up over. So I'll give you a for instance. We had just moved our son to Texas, and on the way back, our U-Haul that we were pulling, one of the tires blew out. And now, mind you, we had already driven from Kankakee County to Fargo, so that's a 10-hour drive, more than a 10-hour drive because we do stops. But then within that same week, we drove down to Fort Worth, Texas, and then, within 2 days after that, we're driving back to Kankakee County. A lot of driving. And all I want to do is get home. And so that tire pops, I could feel it. So I see it in my, side mirror, and I pull over, and we were obviously, or thankfully, we were close enough to an exit. I was able to pull off to the exit. And now I had an opportunity to go, get angry, and I'm tired. I'm exhausted, and I still have. Well, let's put it this way: I started driving at 6 o'clock in the morning. We didn't get home until 12:30 that night, and I knew that when I call, it's going to take at least a couple hours. Well, anyways, it takes 2.5 hours to get it fixed, get back on the road, and everything. So we lost 2.5 hours. But I had a decision to make at that time and go. I can get angry about this, or I can look at it from a different vantage point. And what I decided to do was like, yeah, it sucks, but we're safe. It doesn't cost us any money because, now I'm not running my car. We're on the side of the road. We got out of the car. We soaked up some of the vitamin D. So I was trying to look at, other things to change my perspective. I even now, when I get behind a car that's going slow, I just say, well, God must be slowing me down because there must be something ahead that he doesn't want me to hit or to hit me. And so, that's the emotional game that I play with myself so that I change the temperature. That's kind of where I was going with this.
Well, we talked about the leadership, or the leader is rarely the person who's the loudest in the room or the
Mm-hmm.
strongest person in the room, and however in different areas. really it would be the calmest person, sometimes even the more quieter person. And I think that that's why martial arts helps develop leaderships, because the pressure that's put on the students is such a way that they have to kind of be under that pressure. And I think that that pressure reveals emotional habits pretty quickly. And training, as you continue to train in the martial arts, you get an opportunity to regulate those responses. If you think about either you're in class or you're watching the class, how many times are they doing exercises, or they're doing their hand or foot techniques, and they're doing that same hand and foot technique or that same form over and over and over again? On one hand, you think, man, isn't that boring, just doing the same thing over again? Like, I think the TriStar forms are the most basic forms that we have. That they're the first forms that we learn. On when I tested last, I had to do those forms. You test, you have to do those forms. Nonetheless, the 15 or 30 or 50, however many other forms that we have, we also have to do the most basic. Low block. Low block is the most basic thing. I've been doing a low block for a number of years. You've been doing a low block for even longer than me. Me and you have collectively taught how to do low block more than probably all of our students put together.
Yes.
But we still have to do the test on the low block. And if you think about that, there is a certain, like, you get frustrated sometimes doing the same thing over and over and over again. But as martial artists, that is just how it works. We do that low block all the time. That front choke defense, we do all the time. Every stripe test, every belt test, all the way through. It doesn't go away. It's never subtracting. We're always adding to the not necessarily the curriculum, but you're adding, you're when you step up to that next level and you earn that new belt, you have to know that you can do all of the things below that as the foundation. And then as you step into that new belt, you're like, okay, great. Now that I can stand, because I've learned on all of those things as my foundation, I'm ready to accept and learn the new responsibilities that are coming at me now. And I think that because of that, that teaches emotional regulation in a different way than other sports do, and a different way than what um, like other ways of doing leadership. Like, you can sit in a leadership class or leadership seminar and have theories and ideas about how leadership works, but until you actually go and do it, it's not the same. It's not the same.
Well,
You can't learn to swim by reading a book on how to swim. It just doesn't work that way, right? Like, I remember, I think I read this to the students at one point in time, and I already gave you the ending. But Johnny read a book about accounting, and he went on to be an accountant. Johnny read a book about farming, and he went on to be a farmer. Johnny read a book about all of these things, and he got to the end. Johnny read a book about how to swim, and he drowned, because you can't read and know how to, like, you have to go and do the thing, right? Like, martial arts is like that. You have to go and do the thing. It's by doing it, and by doing it, then you get the foundation to stand on. Then you have the confidence. Then you start to have the responsibility. Then the leadership can come in, and all of those are teaching those emotional skills on how to regulate your emotions, how to compartmentalize the pain and suffering, or the frustration for holding this position over and over again, or doing this form. Gosh, we have to do this form again. But you can't let listen, if I'm your teacher, and if I'm teaching the class, and I can see that in your face, that it is not going to be a good class for you or for anybody else that's in the class. So we know just not to not do that. And I'm not alone in that. Other instructors would be the same way, because
sure.
there's a level of discipline and respect that go with that. And having that discipline or respect means that you don't show how frustrated or concerned or pain, how much pain you're in as you're holding that stance for however long we're holding it for.
Yeah. Well, and we're in a unique position as a martial arts school, and it's specifically ours, but in martial arts in general, we've got the one room classroom. So
Right.
what I mean by that is we get them from kindergarten to high school to college to grad school. And what I mean by that is, we get to develop a relationship with them over time, and then we can turn the heat up. And so when they get to a certain belt, let's say, or we can take that temperature of their emotional regulation, and we go, okay, now they can handle more, and then we give them more. We don't just leave them where they're at, but that's because we have a personal relationship over time with our students. And that's, not, I want to belabor the emotional regulation too long, but that's where we are very unique in what we are able to do. And it goes back to, for years ago, when I talked about grading yourself on a scale from 1 to 10, and everybody comes in at a different level. And by black belt, we want everybody to be a 6. So the person that comes in a 3 goes and tests for their black belt and they're a 6 by that time. But the one that comes in as a -3 and goes and tests for their black belt and they're a +3, who improved the most? So but we're able to do that because we're in that unique position with working with those people over that many years, that we can help them with that. And the that brings us to, I think, leadership, where this allows us is, because we have these different belt levels, we have these different mile markers that we want our students to reach. We are in a perfect position also to have leadership through example. And so the kids, watch other kids. And I've taught this, and you know this, is it's one thing for us to get up and demonstrate how to do the roundhouse kick. But if we pull another kid up and go, okay, today we're going to learn how to roundhouse kick, I'm going to have Johnny, demonstrate it. And then it's somebody their own age. And when they see somebody their own age do it and they do it well, they're like, oh, they believe it even more that they themselves can do it. I mean, that's that leadership through example.
Right. And it's not, okay. So not only that, you talk about, just a few minutes ago, we talked about servant-based leadership and shining the light, taking the light off of you and onto somebody else. That is exactly that, where you are taking the light, where you demonstrate the move. Yes, of course you can do the moves. You've been doing it for, forever. But having a student, having one of their peers do it. So that takes, again, that takes that flashlight and turns the light off of you and it puts the light onto them. Now, as the other leader in the bunch, as the person you leading the class, you have to make sure that you pick somebody where that's going to bolster them as opposed to break them down. Because like if you pick the wrong student for that, then it can have the negative effect. So we have to do it the right way. And it's as the person who's in charge of the class, it's not hard to do that. But again, like I said, that's servant-based leadership, because you're taking that and you're giving the light to that student. And then they get to feel what it's like to be a leader, even just for that little bit. And then, of course, as they're done, we all clap for them. Hey, John, thanks. That was so good. You're awesome. Let's give them a hand. We all clap for them. It feels so good. That builds that person up.
Yeah, because we give kids the opportunity to lead, but also, listen, parents, we have to be careful, because it's not, it can't be, what is it, the phrase, do as I say, not as I do. Right? Kids watch actions more than they listen to your speeches. So, as a parent, if we're going to be they see us be disrespectful to someone, they're going to go and they're going to adopt that. But if they see us being respectful while somebody else is being rude, they're also going to see that, they can adopt that as the example as well. Hard work. They see us work hard. They're going to adopt. In most cases, they're going to adopt that as well. Again, emotional regulation, but staying controlled, or having composure under pressure and not exploding. Children they notice those things, and they're going to mimic those type of things. And if we think about it, how many times have we said something that our parents said when we were a kid? We heard them, and then all of a sudden, as an adult, we say it and we go, wow, that was my mom talking, or wow, that was my dad speaking through me. Like, have you ever had those moments?
Yes.
Yeah. So leadership, begins, there's examples at home, at work, but also, on the mat. But anyways, I digress. So you talked about that we give kids opportunities to be able to lead. And I think that that's important, because, we have our upper belts sometimes helping our lower belts, but that happens at home as well. Because you have sometimes, older siblings helping younger siblings, but the inverse can be true. You can have younger siblings that have a talent in an area that could help an older sibling out as well.
Yes. Well, and I think we talked about this as well. Leadership is a skill, so it has to be practiced. And if we give the kids, if you give your kids, as the parent, you give your kids the opportunity to be leaders. Yeah. And I think you can do this in such a way that it happens, but not by accident. Because what you could do is, listen, I'm going to give you, sit down with them. Listen, hey, I want to give you an opportunity to show me how much of a leader you can be. Do you want to be a leader? Yeah, I want to be a leader. Okay, good. This is what I want you to help. This is what I need you to help me with. And then you have that conversation. And I think that doing it that way will lead to the actual outcome because it's explicit. They know what's going on, and they can see behind the scenes. And the other thing that like, if you think about it the other way, hey, I need you to go and help your sister with this. I don't want to. I got this. Like, you get all kinds of feedback for this, as opposed to, listen, you are so good at this. You are better than your sister at this. Can I have you help me? I want you to try to teach or lead your sister through this, whatever that thing is. Can you do that? Can you be my leader for that? All right, let's do it. That conversation will have a much different outcome than the other
Yes.
conversation. And so there's much less feedback that'll happen with that. But also, again, because you're using the words leadership, I want you to be a leader, you're going to lead, those type of things, they're going to hear these. They're going to say, oh, okay, mom, dad wants me to lead these things. They must think, all right, I'm going to lead my sister for this. That changes that. And again, as opposed to getting those skills by accident, like, if you think back, if you have those conversations with one kid and you have another family that has the other conversation, hey, go help your sister with that. And then you get to the end, 10 or 15 years further down the road, then you have a conversation, hey, what are the things that you learned growing up? Oh, I learned this and this and this and this, because it was explicit and it was clear and it was communicated to them, as opposed to the other one maybe did the exact same stuff, but it wasn't clear, it wasn't explicit, they didn't know what they were doing. And because of that, because they didn't know what they were doing, there was no why, they didn't want to do it. And because they didn't want to do it, there was lots more feedback, AKA fights, and it didn't go the same way. And those outcomes on the other end are going to be vastly different because of the conversation and the clarity and the naming of things that happen on the other side.
Well, it reminds me of, the teaching concept that we share is, the what without the why. So the what without the why is your dad saying, do this because I said so, as opposed to, I want you to do this and here's the reason why. And so when we are, teaching these leadership principles to our kids, don't just give them the what, give them the why, because when you give them the why, and they can make an emotional connection to that why, then that why becomes, it has a tendency to become their why. And so I think that's very important. And you made an excellent example saying, hey, so and so, you're really good at this, and because you are, I need you, if you would, to step up to the plate and help your sister with, or help your brother with X, because you understand this better than they do. So would you lead them, be my leader and lead them in that? And then, when we're done, we can, when you're done, we can come back and talk about it and see how it went, or whatever it is. But you give them the what you need them to do, but you also give them the why. Mm-hmm. And the why is way more important than the what.
You can probably fill in the blanks, because it's been so long since I've heard this, but it reminds me of Zig Ziglar on the same topic, where the granddaughter was old enough now. She was hosting Thanksgiving dinner, and they cut the neck off the turkey or something like that, and she put it and somebody asked, okay, why did you do that? Well, that's because that's what mom. Oh, ham. But that's because that's what mom did. Okay, well, mom's here. Well, mom, how come you did it? Well, I did it because grandma did it. Well, okay, well, grandma's here. Let's talk to grandma. Grandma, how come you did it? Because my oven wasn't big enough to fit the whole thing in. So,
yes.
But that, like, it went down the whole thing, because the what without the why was lost. They just did it because that's what they saw done. And then that's what they saw done, and so on and so on. But if you don't know why it was being done, then you're like, okay, well, this is silly. My oven is huge now. Like, we live it's 3 generations further down the line. I don't need to do this anymore. But they didn't know why they were doing it. So again, if I'm not mistaken, it was a ham, you said?
Yeah, and it was just the story of the ham. It wasn't necessarily his family, but yes.
Yeah, that again, I think about that from time to time, and I've been telling it wrong for a while now. But the concept, I think,
as long as the concept is there, that doesn't matter.
Yes, yeah. So I think martial arts. Obviously, we're gonna circle back to martial arts so many times. Martial arts is our bread and butter. Martial arts builds leaders in a natural way, in a way that's different than, again, what other sports are able to do.
But let me. I'm going to be as bold as to say as TriStar Martial Arts builds leaders.
There you go.
Because we've had other episodes where we've kind of drawn out why that is the case. That it's not just martial arts, but specifically TriStar Martial Arts, because we have purposefully put things into the program to actually make that happen. So I'm sorry to cut you off. I wanted to state that.
Well, no, you're right on, because we have went through, actually, we went through the program a number of times and redesigned not only just the leadership development curriculum, but the entire curriculum, from the words of the month, the whole thing. So we're not getting or given these things out, these tools out by accident. We're doing it with purpose and dedication and care and craftiness. And again, with iterations, like it's not just like this is the first version. We've changed and modified things as we go because we learn. So yes, okay. Let me rephrase this. All right. TriStar Martial Arts builds leaders in a way that other sports does not, and in a way that natural other opportunities do not build leadership. Because the way that we build leaders is through respect, discipline, consistency, mentorship, responsibility, and service. Older students help the younger students. Students learn how to lead by first leading and following. Right? Students
Leading themselves.
They lead themselves, and then they learn how to follow the other people. And once you
Yeah.
learn how to follow, once you can lead yourself and you learn how to follow other people, that's huge, right? Many adults skip learning how to follow because they're kind of burnt out because the type of leaders that they've been around is not, they're exhausted by those leaders that are there. No one wants to be led by a megaphone with no discipline, or somebody that is consistently flying off the handle because something didn't go their way and they need half a day to calm back down before you can talk to them like a human again. We do not want that. And so TriStar Martial Arts, we've done our work. We have crafted and designed the program in such a way that these things are happening by default, not by accident, not by happenstance, but by design, purposefully dedicated and iterated upon.
Yeah, and the other aspect to that is at each and every level. So I kind of look at, we've got our basic program. So there's leadership components that are in there, but then you move to the leadership program, and then there's higher level leadership that's happening in that, and then you move to the storm team program. That's even higher levels of leadership. And then lastly, our actual instructor program. That would be where we would say that's the highest level of leadership that we have at the moment. And so there are tiers that they push through. And look, even if they just stay in the basic program and go through, they're going to get a level of leadership. But by moving up into those different levels, they become a totally different person. And I had gotten this last night, but I didn't see it until this morning. I know I got it yesterday, during the day, but I didn't read it until this morning. So you remember Chris Deering?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, her maiden name is different now, but anyways, I'm looking off so I can read it, but she says, I know I've shared this with you before, but sometimes it just hits harder. She says, I still carry lessons that I learned from my training with you. I apply them to my life, and I teach my daughters the lessons and even the phrases. She said, twice this week, I've referenced something that you had either said or taught, and I'm so thankful for the influence on my life. It goes to show how important those formative years are, how those lessons learned in that time go with you wherever you go in life. And she says, I just simply want to say thank you again. And so if you think about, and we've talked about this before, like the ages 4 to 8, 4 to 10, those are those formative ages that we really want to shape that identity of your child through a program that does it on purpose, that builds leaders on purpose. And of course we're biased, but if we don't talk about what we do, how are you going to know? But there you are. You've got somebody else talking about what we do.
It's interesting listening to that, because those are like the highlighted things of the key topics that are over and over that we've talked about on the podcast now. Like this is episode number 25, I think. And like if we were to dissect all 25 episodes so far and like, okay, what are the key points? It's those key points. It's those things that she hit in that message.
Well, isn't that, now that's leadership in adulthood. And just so that listeners know, she was a regular student, got into, at the time it was called Black Belt Club. Now it's leadership. And then she became a storm team member. She was also an instructor with us before she went off to college. And so she's gone through that hierarchy that we've talked about. So, leadership is also we need this as adults. And so it doesn't just stop with us being, with our kids or us as being kids. There's leadership at work. There's leadership in our marriage and our parenting. Obviously, she brought that up. There's leadership in our faith. And so that it's just dramatically important that we become the type of leader that we can have the right type of influence on people that we come into contact with on a daily basis.
Right. I think it comes back to that question, right? The question that leaders should be asking is, how can I make the people around me better? And that question, again, how you answer that question changes how you interact with all of the people you come in contact with. How can I make the people around me better?
Yeah. And I this is the phrase that I've adopted, and it's probably been about a few years now, but who can I be a hero to today? And not hero like, again, I get the microphone, but basically, who can I support? How can I support them? Who can I be a hero to today? It is kind of, but what you're saying is great. How can I make people, what'd you say? How can I make people around me better? Is that what you said?
Yeah. How do I make the people around me better?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, those questions, they change everything.
Mm-hmm. Well, and listen, here's your challenge for this week, listeners. This week, ask your child, how can you help somebody this week? Not how can you stand out, not how can you win attention, just how can you serve? Or like you said, who can you be a hero to this week? And adults, listen, as the listeners, ask yourself the same question, because leadership is not just about being noticed. It's about being useful. It's about being trustworthy. And it starts much earlier than most people think.
Amen to that.
Hey, listen, I guess I always like to do this. I like to tease next week's episode. Next week, we're going to dive into something that every family struggles with, and that's emotional control. And we talked a little bit about that here today, but how do we help kids regulate anger, frustration, disappointment, anxiety? And, as adults, how can we stop modeling emotional chaos and telling kids to calm down? What is that one step that we can do to help to convey that message lovingly, of course, and with respect, maybe less like a roundhouse kick, but more like a roundhouse kick to your emotional habits. Thanks for joining the TriStar podcast, where black belts begin at home. Connect with our community by visiting tristarkarate.com. Follow us on social media and share this episode with a family who's ready to grow stronger together. Until next time, stay focused, stay faithful, and keep training like a champion.